The coffee cup shattered against the marble floor of the private terminal, and Dominic Ashford watched $17 million evaporate into the night sky along with his jet. "Sir, I'm so sorry." Michael's voice cracked, his face pale as death. Dominic's hand was still extended. Fingers curled around air where the cup had been before rage had turned his grip to stone and sent porcelain exploding across Italian tile. His chest heaved. His vision blurred at the edges. 12 years. 12 years of never missing a flight, of controlling every variable, of being the man who bent the universe to his will, and now, get out. His voice was barely a whisper, which made it more terrifying than a scream. "Sir, please, I can try to..." "Get out!" The roar tore from somewhere primal. Somewhere he'd locked away since he was a boy, watching his father's company collapse, watching their house get foreclosed, watching his mother cry herself sick while his father drank himself to death. He'd sworn he would never be powerless again. Michael fled. Dominic stood alone in the empty gate, his reflection fractured in the terminal windows like a broken mirror, and felt something crack open inside his chest. Something dangerous and raw that he'd spent 2 decades burying beneath suits and success and the armor of absolute control. His phone buzzed. Tokyo Investors. He watched it ring, watched his future dissolve with each vibration, and made a choice that terrified him. He let it go to voicemail. The silence that followed was deafening, electric, alive with the thundering of his own heartbeat and the whisper of a question he'd been running from his entire adult life. What happens when winning stops being enough? His hands were shaking, actually shaking, and Dominic Ashford's hands never shook. Not during hostile takeovers or board coups or the leveraged buyout that had made him a billionaire at 32. But they were shaking now, and his throat was tight, and something hot and unfamiliar was building behind his eyes. And he was 38 years old, standing in an airport about to break down like he was 8 again, hiding in his childhood closet, while creditors pounded on the door. "Sir? Sir, are you all right?" The voice was female, concerned, close enough that he could smell something warm and sweet, cinnamon, maybe, or vanilla, and when he turned, she was there, dark hair escaping from a messy bun. Brown eyes wide with genuine worry, not the calculated concern of someone who wanted something from him. A Café apron dusted with what looked like cocoa powder. She was reaching out, her hand hovering near his arm but not quite touching, like she was afraid he might shatter. "You're bleeding," she said softly, and he looked down to see his palm sliced open where he'd apparently gripped a shard of the broken cup, blood welling dark and red against the skin, and he hadn't even felt it. His voice broke. The great Dominic Ashford, who'd once negotiated a 9-figure deal with collapsed lung, couldn't form a complete sentence. "Come with me." Her hand closed around his wrist, gentle but firm, warm against his skin, and she was pulling him away from the shattered cup, away from the windows and his ghost of a reflection, away from the private terminal and into the fluorescent chaos of the main concourse, where people rushed past like he wasn't dying inside, and he followed her because for the first time in 12 years, he had absolutely no idea what else to do. She led him through a maze of gates and shops, moving with the swift confidence of someone who knew every corner of this place, and Dominic let himself be led like a child, his mind still stuck in that moment of shattering porcelain and shattering control. They stopped at a small cafe tucked between a duty-free shop and a newsstand. The sign read, "Iris's Brew" in hand-painted letters. She pushed through the door, the bell chiming cheerfully, absurdly cheerfully given that his hand was bleeding and his career was crumbling, and he was pretty sure he was having some kind of breakdown in real time. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to a chair at a small corner table. Her voice had changed from concerned to businesslike, and he found himself obeying without question. She disappeared behind the counter, and he sat there, staring at his bleeding hand, his mind eerily blank. The cafe was warm, quiet. The lighting was soft yellow, instead of the harsh white of the terminal. He could hear the hiss of an espresso machine, the quiet jazz playing from hidden speakers, the rustle of her movements behind the counter. When she returned, she was carrying a first aid kit that looked well-used and a damp cloth. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down without asking permission, reaching for his hand. "May I?" she asked, and her voice was gentle again, like she was talking to something wild that might bolt. He nodded, not trusting his voice. She took his hand in both of hers, and her touch was careful, professional. But there was something about the way her fingers curved around his palm, something that made his breath catch, made the white noise in his head quiet just a fraction. "This might sting," she warned, pressing the cloth against the cut. It did sting, sharp and immediate, and the pain was somehow grounding, pulling him back into his body, into the present moment, away from the spiraling thoughts of failure and loss and the look on his father's face the day they'd lost everything. "What happened?" she asked quietly, her eyes on his hand as she cleaned the wound with steady, efficient movements. "I missed my flight. That's not what I'm asking." He looked up and found her watching him, and her eyes were the warmest brown he'd ever seen, and they were filled with compassion that made something inside him want to crack wide open. "I don't know," he admitted, and the honesty of it shocked him. "I don't know what happened." "Well," she said, applying antibiotic ointment with gentleness that made his throat tight. "Whatever it was, you're safe now, and your hand is going to be fine. The cut's not deep." She began wrapping gauze around his palm, her movements sure and practiced. "I'm Stella, by the way. Stella Chun. And you're sitting in my cafe, bleeding on my table, which means I'm obligated to at least know your name. Dominic." His voice came out rough, scrape raw. "Dominic Ashford." She paused, her hand stilling on his. Her head tilted slightly, a small furrow appearing between her eyebrows. "Should I know that name?" And just like that, the world shifted. She didn't know. This woman, this stranger who'd found him on the verge of a breakdown and pulled him to safety, had no idea who he was. Didn't recognize his name from Forbes covers or business headlines or the gossip pages that tracked his dating life like a spectator sport. To her, he wasn't Dominic Ashford, billionaire CEO. He was just Dominic. Just a man having the worst night of his life. "No," he said softly, something loosening in his chest. "No, you shouldn't." She smiled then, a small, kind smile that made her whole face soften, and finished wrapping his hand. "There. Good as new. Well, not new, but functional." She sat back, but didn't let go of his hand immediately, and he didn't pull away. "Now, what do you actually need, Dominic? And don't say nothing because I can see that's a lie." What did he need? He needed to fix the Tokyo deal. He needed to salvage his reputation. He needed to get back on his jet and his trajectory and his carefully controlled life where he was. Always winning, always ahead, always in control. But that wasn't what came out. "Coffee," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Can I have some coffee? And stay here for a while." Stella's expression softened even further, and she squeezed his bandaged hand once before releasing it. "Yeah," she said gently. "Yeah, you can stay as long as you need." She stood and moved behind the counter, and Dominic watched her, this complete stranger who'd shown him more genuine kindness in 10 minutes than he'd experienced in years, and felt something he hadn't felt since before his father died, before he'd armored himself in ambition and success. He felt seen. "One coffee coming up." Stella called over the hiss of the espresso machine. "And I'm making you a sandwich too, because you look like you haven't eaten in a week. Don't argue, it's on the house. Consider it hazard pay for bleeding on my furniture. Despite everything, the ruined deal, the professional catastrophe, the existential crisis currently unfolding in his chest, Dominic felt his lips curve into something that might have been a smile. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't tasted my cooking." But he wasn't thanking her for the food. He was thanking her for this pocket of warmth and safety in the middle of the worst night of his life. This moment where he could just be a person, not a brand or a net worth or a headline. This moment where he could just breathe. Stella returned with a steaming mug and a sandwich on a chipped ceramic plate. The coffee smelled incredible, rich and complex with a hint of something he couldn't identify. She set both in front of him and then, instead of returning to the counter, pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "So," she said, folding her arms on the table and looking at him with those warm, perceptive eyes. "You missed your flight. That's obviously not the whole story. Want to talk about it? Or do you want to sit in comfortable silence while you eat overpriced airport food?" He should say silence. He should maintain the walls he built so carefully over 2 decades. He should be calling Michael, calling the board. doing damage control instead of sitting in a tiny cafe with a barista whose eyes made him want to confess things he'd never told anyone. Instead, he picked up the coffee, took a sip, and felt something warm spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the drink. "It's complicated," he said. "The best stories usually are." Stella leaned back in her chair, settling in like she had all the time in the world. "I've got nowhere to be for the next 3 hours, except here. So if you want to talk, I'm listening. And if you want silence, I'm excellent at that too." Dominic looked at her, really looked at her. The exhaustion around her eyes that spoke of too many late shifts. The kindness in her expression that seemed genuine, not manufactured. The way she sat across from him like they were old friends instead of strangers who'd met 15 minutes ago. And he made a decision that would change everything. "The flight I missed was to Tokyo," he began, and as he spoke, Stella leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand, her attention absolute and unwavering, and Dominic Asher began to tell his story to someone who actually wanted to hear it. Not because of who he was, but because of who she was. $17 million, Stella repeated slowly, like she was testing the weight of the numbers on her tongue. "You miss a $17 million deal because of traffic." "Yes." She let out a low whistle, leaning back in her chair. The cafe was still empty except for them. The old man with the paperback had left an hour ago, and no new customers had arrived. Outside the window, the terminal moved with its constant flow of travelers. But inside Iris's brew, time seemed to have slowed to something almost peaceful. "Okay, I'm going to be honest with you, Dominic," Stella said, her expression serious. "I cannot conceptualize that amount of money. Like, my brain literally will not compute. The most money I've ever lost at one time was $300 when my car's transmission died, and I cried for 2 days. Despite himself, Dominic felt a smile tug at his lips. $300 is a lot of money, not compared to 17 million. Money is relative. Spoken like someone who has a lot of it, she wasn't being cruel. Her tone was more teasing than accusatory, but the observation landed with precision. "I grew up without any," he said quietly, surprising himself. He never talked about his childhood. Never. It was a locked box, buried deep, part of the past that he'd left behind when he'd made his first million. "My father lost everything when I was 8. Our house, his business, his dignity. We went from comfortable middle class to living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 families sharing 1 bathroom." Stella's expression shifted, softened. "I'm sorry. Don't be. It made me who I am." The words came out more bitter than he'd intended. Hungry, driven, unwilling to ever be in that position again. "And now you're in an airport cafe, talking to a stranger because you missed a flight." She tilted her head, studying him with those perceptive eyes. "What does that make you feel?" "Terrified," he admitted. The honesty was liberating and horrifying in equal measure. Like I'm 8 years old again, hiding in the closet while my mother cries and creditors pound on the door. Stella was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, Dominic heard the distant announcements of departing flights, the jazz still playing softly from the speakers, the hum of the espresso machine on standby. Normal sounds. Grounding sounds. "Can I tell you something?" Stella asked finally. "And you can't get mad because you're in my cafe and I patched up your hand, so you owe me patience." "All right. I think maybe missing that flight was the best thing that could have happened to you tonight." Anger flared hot and immediate in his chest. "How can you possibly?" "I said don't get mad." She held up a hand, her expression calm. "Just listen. You came in here looking like a man on the edge of something bad. Not just upset about a business deal. Genuinely on the verge of breaking. And yeah, losing $17 million sucks. I'm not minimizing that. But Dominic," she leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm, "you needed to break. You needed something to go wrong badly enough that you had to stop and breathe, and remember you're a human being, not a machine." "You don't know me," he said, but the words had no heat behind them. "You're right. I don't. But I know that look. I've seen it in the mirror enough times." She paused, her fingers tracing absent patterns on the table. 3 years ago, I was pre-med at Columbia, top of my class, full scholarship, on track, to become a surgeon like my parents wanted. I was working myself to death. Literally. 20-hour days, no sleep, living on caffeine and ambition. Dominic found himself leaning forward, drawn into her story. Then one day, I collapsed during an exam. Just fell right out of my chair. Stress-induced cardiac episode. I was 23 years old, and my heart was giving out because I'd forgotten it existed. Her smile was sad, distant. I woke up in the hospital, and my Aunt Iris was there, and she said the same thing I just said to you. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is everything falling apart, because it's the only thing that makes us stop long enough to notice we've been running in the wrong direction. What happened? Dominic asked quietly. I dropped out. My parents didn't speak to me for a year. I came here to Iris's Café, and she taught me how to make coffee and how to breathe and how to be a person instead of an achievement machine. Stella's expression was complicated. Pride and regret mixed together. I'm not saying it was the right choice for everyone. I'm not even sure it was completely the right choice for me. But I'm alive, and I'm here. And tonight, I gotta help a stranger who looked like he needed help. So maybe it all worked out the way it was supposed to. The story settled between them, heavy with meaning. Dominic wanted to argue, to insist that their situations were different, that he wasn't running himself into the ground, that he was fine. Everything was fine, he was just having one bad night. But he couldn't, because she was right. He'd been running for 30 years, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd stopped. I don't know how to not work, he admitted. I don't know who I am if I'm not building something, winning something, proving something. That's what scares me about you, Stella said softly. You don't see yourself as a person. You see yourself as a function, a tool, and tools get used up and thrown away. Her words hit like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. Because she was right. She was absolutely right. And he hated it and was grateful for it in equal measure. So what do I do? The question came out barely above a whisper. Stella smiled, and it was the warmest, most genuine expression he'd seen in years. Right now, you finish your sandwich. And then we're going to have a completely normal, non-business conversation where you remember how to be a person having a chat with another person. How does that sound? Terrifying. Good. Best things usually are. She stood up and moved back behind the counter. And Dominic watched her. This woman who'd somehow taken the worst night of her professional life and turned it into something else. Something that felt like possibility. He picked up the sandwich. Took a bite. It was good. Really good. Actually, turkey and avocado. And that hint of too much mustard that somehow worked perfectly. This is excellent, he called to her. Don't sound so surprised. I'll have you know I'm an excellent sandwich maker. It's my hidden talent. She was doing something with the espresso machine, cleaning or preparing, her movements efficient and practiced. What's your hidden talent, Dominic? And you can't say making money because that's your obvious talent. He thought about it, genuinely thought about it, and came up empty. I don't think I have one. She turned to look at him, eyebrows raised. Everyone has hidden talents. Things they're good at that have nothing to do with their job. I play piano, he said, the memory surfacing from somewhere deep. I did. I haven't touched one in probably 15 years, but I used to play. Why'd you stop? No time. And he hesitated, then pushed forward. And my father used to play. After he died, I couldn't anymore. It hurt too much. Stella's expression melted into something achingly sympathetic. She walked back over to the table and sat down again, and this time she reached across and took his uninjured hand in both of hers. The gesture was so natural, so comforting, that Dominic felt his throat tighten. I'm sorry, she said simply. That's a terrible thing to lose. I lost a lot when he died, but not everything. She squeezed his hand gently. You're still here. And you just told me something real and vulnerable, which means there's still a person in there under all that armor. A person who remembers how to feel things that aren't related to profit margins. He looked down at their joined hands. Her fingers were small against his, her skin warm, her touch anchoring him to this moment in a way he couldn't fully explain. When was the last time someone had held his hand? Not as a prelude to something else, not as a transaction or performance, but just held his hand. "Tell me about the cafe," he said, his voice rough. "How did you end up here?" Stella's face lit up in a way that transformed her from pretty to absolutely radiant. "Oh, you've done it now. You've activated my special interest. I can talk about this place for hours. I have time." "You sure?" "Because I'm genuinely not exaggerating. I once talked a customer's ear off for 90 minutes about the difference between Arabica and Robusta beans. Tell me everything." So she did. She told him about Iris, her aunt who'd been more of a mother to her than her own mother. About how Iris had opened this cafe 20 years ago with money she'd saved for a decade, how she'd hand-painted every sign, chosen every piece of furniture with care, created a space that felt like home in the middle of the sterile transit of an airport. She told him about taking over last year, when Iris retired to Florida, about the terror and pride of suddenly being responsible for her aunt's legacy, about the struggle to keep the place afloat when corporate chains offered cheaper coffee and faster service, when rent kept going up and supplies got more expensive, when she was working 80-hour weeks just to break even. She told him about the regulars, the pilot who always ordered a triple espresso and left inspirational quotes on napkins, the elderly woman who came every Sunday to read romance novels and drink Earl Grey, the businessman who'd been fired 3 years ago and still came by every week in a suit, pretending he was traveling for work because he couldn't bear to tell his family the truth. "You remember all of them," Dominic said, amazed. "Of course I do. They're my people." She said it so simply, like it was obvious, like caring about strangers was the most natural thing in the world. Everyone who walks through that door has a story. And if I can make their day slightly less terrible with good coffee and a friendly face, then I'm doing something that matters. You really believe that, don't you? She cocked her head, studying him. "Don't you think that making people's lives better matters more than making $17 million? He stopped. Did he? Had he ever thought about his work in those terms? He built companies, created jobs, generated wealth. That mattered, didn't it? I provide employment for thousands of people. That's not what I asked." She was pushing him, gently but firmly, into territory he didn't want to explore, into questions he'd spent decades avoiding. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I used to think I was building something meaningful. Now I'm not sure if I even know what meaning looks like anymore." Stella was quiet for a moment, her thumb absently stroking the back of his hand. The touch was electric, distracting, comforting all at once. "Can I show you something?" she asked. "Yes." She released his hand. He felt the loss of her touch immediately, and stood up, walking to the far wall of the cafe. Dominic hadn't noticed it before, but the entire wall was covered in photographs. Polaroids, mostly, overlapping and pinned with colorful thumbtacks. Stella gestured for him to join her, and he stood, crossing the small space to stand beside her. She smelled like coffee and vanilla and something uniquely her, and he had to fight the urge to move closer. "Every single person in these photos is someone who's come through this cafe," she explained, her voice soft with affection. "Iris started it. She'd take their picture, write their name and their story on the back, and put it up, a visual reminder that this place isn't just about coffee. It's about connection, about remembering that every person matters." Dominic scanned the wall. There were hundreds of photos, thousands, maybe, faces of every age, every background, caught in moments of laughter or contemplation or simple presence. "This one," Stella said, pointing to a faded Polaroid in the upper left corner, "is the first customer Iris ever had. His name was James. He was flying to Seattle to say goodbye to his dying father, and he was terrified. Iris made him coffee and listened to him talk for 2 hours. And when he left, he said she'd given him the courage to face what was coming." She moved to another photo. "This is Sarah. She'd just gotten accepted to her dream PhD program, but couldn't afford to go. 3 customers overheard her story and pooled their money to help with her first semester's tuition. Total strangers, just wanted to help." Another photo. Michael lost his job, his wife, everything. Came here every day for 6 months, and Iris would feed him for free. Now he's a regular who volunteers at homeless shelters. On and on she went. Each photo a story, Each story a thread in an intricate web of human connection that Stella and Iris have been weaving for 2 decades. Don't you see? Stella turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with passion and purpose. This is what matters. Not millions of dollars or corporate deals or winning. People. Real, messy, complicated, beautiful people. Making their lives slightly less hard for even just a moment. That's meaning. Dominic stared at the wall of faces, and something shifted deep in his chest. A tectonic movement. Fundamental and irreversible. When was the last time he'd really seen the people who worked for him? When had he last asked about their lives, their families, their dreams that had nothing to do with quarterly reports? When had he stopped seeing people as people? "I want to be in one of your photos," he heard himself say. Stella blinked, surprised. "What?" "I want to be on this wall. I want." His voice cracked, and he had to pause, collect himself. "I want to be remembered as more than just a missed meeting and a $17 million mistake. I want to be a person who was here, who mattered, even if just for one night." Stella's expression melted into something so tender it made his chest ache. "You already matter, Dominic. The moment you walked through that door, you mattered." She reached up and cupped his face with one hand, and the gesture was so unexpected, so intimate, that Dominic froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. "You matter," she repeated, her voice fierce. "Not because of your money or your company or your success. You matter because you're you. Because you're a person having a hard night who let someone help him. Because you listened to a stranger's stories and cared about them. Because you're standing here, being brave enough to be vulnerable. That's what makes you matter." No one had ever said anything like that to him, not in his entire life. People told him he was brilliant, successful, impressive, powerful. No one had ever told him he simply mattered for existing. The emotion that welled up in him was overwhelming, enormous, a wave that threatened to pull him under. His vision blurred, his breath hitched, and before he could stop himself, he was crying. Actually crying, tears streaming down his face while this woman he'd known for 3 hours held his face in her hands and didn't look away. "It's okay," she murmured, her thumb brushing away his tears with heartbreaking gentleness. "It's okay to break. It's okay to feel things. You're safe here." And he was. For the first time in 3 decades, Dominic Ashford felt completely, utterly safe. He let himself break. Let the tears come. Let the grief and exhaustion and loneliness pour out of him in great, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. And Stella held him through it, her hand steady, her presence unwavering. When he finally quieted, when the storm had passed and he was left feeling hollowed out but somehow lighter, he became aware of how close they were standing. How her hand was still cradling his face. How her eyes were suspiciously bright. Like she'd been crying too. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me for treating you like a human being. That should be the baseline, not an exceptional act. In my world, it is exceptional. Then your world is broken, Dominic." She said it without judgment, just simple, sad truth. "And maybe you're the one who can fix it." He looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something click into place. Something that felt like recognition, like coming home, like finding a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing. "Can I ask you something potentially inappropriate?" he said. "Given that you just cried on me, I think we're past worrying about appropriate. Can I kiss you?" Stella's eyes widened, her breath catching. The air between them electrified, charged with possibility and danger, and something neither of them could name. "You don't even know me," she breathed. "I feel like I know you better after 3 hours than I know people I've worked with for years. You're having a bad night. You're emotionally vulnerable. This is probably just..." "It's not." He cupped her face the way she was still cupping his, mirroring her gesture. "Stella, I've been with a lot of people. I've had a lot of experiences. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that this, whatever this is between us, is not just a bad night and vulnerability. This is real." She stared at him, and he could see the war happening behind her eyes. Logic versus feeling. Self-protection versus possibility. "If I let you kiss me," she said slowly, "and then you walk out of here tomorrow and never come back, I'm going to be heartbroken. So I need you to be really, really sure that this is what you want. I'm sure. Dominic. I'm terrified, he admitted. I'm more scared right now than I've been in 20 years. But I'm sure. So please, Stella, let me kiss you. She took a shaking breath, closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were filled with a courage that matched his own. Okay, she whispered. Okay. He closed the distance between them slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, and when his lips finally met hers, the entire world fell away. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question being asked and answered, but then something shifted, deepened, and suddenly they were pressed together, her hands fisting his shirt, his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, always closer, like they could somehow merge into one person if they just tried hard enough. She tasted like coffee and sugar and something indefinably her, and kissing her felt like falling and flying simultaneously. Like every cheesy romance novel metaphor he'd ever rolled his eyes, it suddenly made perfect sense. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, Stella let out a shaky laugh. Well, she said, her voice unsteady. That was something. Yeah. His heart was racing, his entire body alive in a way it hadn't been in years. That was definitely something. What do we do now? It was the question, wasn't it? What came next? He was still Dominic Ashford, billionaire CEO with a company in crisis and professional catastrophe to manage. She was still Stella Chun, cafe owner working 80-hour weeks just to survive. Their worlds didn't overlap. They couldn't overlap, except they just had. I don't know, he admitted, but I don't want this to end. I don't want to walk out of here and never see you again. I don't want that either. She pulled back slightly, her hand still resting on his chest, over his racing heart. But Dominic, I need you to be realistic. You're in crisis mode right now. Everything feels heightened and intense. Tomorrow, you're going to go back to your life, and this, she gestured between them, is going to feel like a dream. A strange, wonderful dream that happened during the worst night of your life. You're wrong. How do you know? Because I've had dreams before. I know what they feel like when you wake up and reality sets in. And this doesn't feel like that. This feels like the first real thing I've experienced in decades. Stella's expression was torn, hope and skepticism fighting for dominance. I want to believe you. Then believe me. Believe this. He took her hand, pressed it flat against his chest where his heart was thundering. Feel that? That's real. You're real. What I'm feeling right now is real. What are you feeling? The question hung between them, enormous and terrifying, because what he was feeling was impossible, illogical, completely insane after only 3 hours. But it was also undeniable. Like I've been asleep for years, he said quietly, and you just woke me up? Tears spilled down Stella's cheeks, and she laughed, a watery, emotional sound. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, and it's coming from a man who I'm pretty sure doesn't even know my last name. Chun. Stella Chun. You told me earlier. Okay, so you know my name. Do you know anything else about me? You dropped out of pre-med at Columbia. Your Aunt Iris is the most important person in your life. You notice everything. You care about people with a ferocity that's almost painful to witness. You make the best coffee I've ever had. You're terrified of failure, but more terrified of not trying. And when you smile, really smile, it feels like the sun coming up. Stella stared at him, her mouth slightly open. How do you know all of that? Because I've been paying attention. Because for the first time in longer than I can remember, I care about someone more than I care about myself. Dominic. Whatever she was going to say was cut off by the sound of the cafe door opening. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers, and Dominic turned to see a young couple walking in, clearly exhausted travelers looking for caffeine. Stella wiped her eyes quickly, smoothing down her apron, and switching into professional mode with impressive speed. Welcome to Iris's Brew. What can I get you? As she took their order, Dominic returned to his table, his mind racing. The spell had been broken, reality intruding, but the feelings remained. If anything, they felt stronger now, more urgent, more real, more impossible to ignore. He watched Stella work, The easy competence of her movements, the genuine friendliness in her voice as she chatted with the couple. She was in her element here, comfortable in a way he rarely felt in his own boardroom. What was he doing? What was he thinking? He couldn't just throw away his life for a woman he'd just met. That was insane. Reckless. The kind of impulsive decision that destroyed careers and fortunes. But as Stella glanced over at him, catching his eye and giving him a small, secret smile that made his chest constrict, Dominic realized something terrifying. He didn't care. For the first time in his adult life, the thought of losing money, losing status, losing everything he'd built, it paled in comparison to the thought of losing her. The couple left 20 minutes later with their coffee and pastries, and the cafe fell silent again. Stella locked the door behind them, flipping the sign to close, and turned back to face Dominic. "It's midnight," she said softly. "Officially closing time. Should I go?" The question physically hurt to ask. "Do you want to go?" "No. God, no." She crossed back to him, and this time there was no hesitation. She climbed into his lap, straddling him in a chair, her hands framing his face as she looked down at him with an intensity that stole his breath. "Then stay," she whispered. "Stay while I clean up. Stay while I count the register. Stay and talk to me and be here with me for as long as we have. What if I want more than just a night? Then we'll figure it out." She pressed her forehead to his, her breath warm against his lips. "But right now, in this moment, can we just be? Can we exist in this bubble where nothing else matters except that you're here and I'm here and we found each other against all odds?" He wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her. "Yes, yeah, we can do that." They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other, and Dominic felt something inside him settle. A peace he hadn't known he was missing. Finally, reluctantly, Stella pulled back. "I actually do have to clean up. Health code violations wait for no romance. Can I help?" She blinked, clearly surprised. "You want to help me clean a cafe? I want to spend time with you. If that involves cleaning, then yes." A slow smile spread across her face. "Okay, Mr. Billionaire. Let's see if you know which end of a mop to hold." Cleaning the cafe with Stella was, in probably one of the best hours of Dominic's life. She put him in charge of wiping down tables while she tackled the espresso machine, and they worked in comfortable silence broken by occasional conversation. She told him stories about her worst customers, the man who'd thrown a latte at her because it wasn't hot enough, the woman who tried to pay with a personal check from 1987, the teenager who'd asked if they sold, like, regular coffee, not that fancy stuff. He found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. "Your turn," Stella said, up to her elbows in soapy water as she scrubbed the steam wand. "Tell me your worst business meeting story." Dominic thought about it as he cleaned the last table. 3 years ago, I was negotiating a merger with a company in Singapore. The CEO invited me to a traditional business dinner, very formal, very ceremonial. I spent weeks preparing, learned about proper etiquette, studied the cultural expectations. Let me guess, it all went horribly wrong. I accidentally insulted his grandmother. Stella's laugh rang out, bright and delighted. How do you accidentally insult someone's grandmother? By confusing the Mandarin words for respected elder and old goat. In my defense, they sound very similar. Oh my God. She was full on giggling now, her whole body shaking with it. What happened? He stared at me for about 30 seconds, the longest 30 seconds of my life. And then he started laughing so hard he nearly fell out his chair. Turns out his grandmother was apparently famous for being stubborn and ornery, and he'd been calling her the old goat privately for years. The accidental insult broke the tension, and we closed the deal that night. So you're telling me that insulting someone's grandmother is a valid negotiation tactic? I'm telling you that sometimes the best things happen when everything goes wrong. Stella stopped scrubbing, her hands stilling in the water. She turned to look at him, and her expression was soft, thoughtful. Yeah, sometimes they do. The moment stretched between them, charged with meaning. Dominic set down his rag and crossed to her, unable to stay away any longer. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as she leaned back into him. "What are we doing, Stella?" he murmured against her hair. "I don't know. Something reckless, probably. I don't do reckless. Maybe it's time you started." He turned her in his arms, so they were facing each other, and the vulnerability in her eyes mirrored what he felt in his own chest. "I live in New York. My company is there, my life is there, everything I built is there. And I live here. Well, technically in Queens, but I'm at this cafe 80 hours a week. My life is here. So we're impossible. Completely impossible." She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "But I'm going to be devastated when you leave anyway. So maybe impossibility is overrated." "Stella, kiss me again," she interrupted, her voice urgent. "Before we overthink this into oblivion, kiss me like we have all the time in the world, even though we both know we don't." So he did. This kiss was different from the first. Deeper, more desperate, tinged with the bittersweet knowledge that their time was finite. Her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and he lifted her onto the counter, stepping between her legs, needing to eliminate every inch of space between them. They kissed until they were both breathless, until Stella's lips were swollen and red, until Dominic's carefully styled hair was a complete disaster, until the rational part of his brain that governed his every decision had been completely overridden by something primal and uncontrollable. When they finally broke apart, Stella's eyes were dark, her chest heaving. "I have an apartment," she said, her voice husky. "It's small and kind of messy and probably not what you're used to, but..." "Yes." He didn't need to hear the rest. "Yes to wherever you want to go. Yes to whatever this is. Just yes." Relief and joy and desire warred on her face. She slid down from the counter, took his hand, and led him toward the back of the cafe where a small door marked private led to what he assumed were storage and office space. But when she opened it, there was a narrow staircase leading up. "I live above the cafe," she explained, climbing the stairs with him following close behind. "Iris set it up so she wouldn't have to commute. When she retired, I took over both the cafe and the apartment. It made sense financially, even if it means I can never really escape work." They emerged into a small studio apartment that was exactly as she described, small, slightly messy, with books and papers scattered across every surface. But it was also cozy and warm and unmistakably hers. String lights hung across the ceiling, casting a soft glow. Plants crowded the windowsill. A worn armchair sat in one corner with a quilted blanket draped over it. Clearly her reading spot. It felt more like home than his penthouse had ever felt. "It's perfect," he said. Stella turned to face him, and he could see the nervousness in her expression. "Dominic, I need to say something before we do anything else." "Okay, I don't do casual. I know that probably sounds old-fashioned or whatever, but I can't give you my body without giving you my heart, and I'm already halfway there as it is. So if this is just a one-night thing for you, if you could walk away tomorrow and never look back, I need you to tell me now, because I'm already going to be hurt. But if we do this, if we sleep together, it's going to destroy me when you leave." The honesty of it, the raw vulnerability, made something crack open even wider in Dominic's chest. She was handing him her heart with shaking hands, trusting him not to break it, and he'd never felt less worthy of anything in his life. "I can't promise you forever," he said, forcing himself to be equally honest. "I can't promise that we'll figure out how to make this work, or that the distance won't kill us, or that my life won't pull me back into the chaos that I'm running from right now." Stella's face fell, and he saw the exact moment she started to pull away, to protect herself. But he continued, stepping closer, cupping her face in his hands. "I can promise you that what I feel for you is real. I can promise you that I've never wanted anything. Not a deal, not money, not success. As much as I want this, want you, I can promise you that whatever time we have, I will cherish every second of it. And I can promise you that when I leave, it's going to destroy me too." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "That's the saddest romantic thing I've ever heard. I'm new at this. Give me time. I'll get better at the romance. How much time do we have?" He pulled out his phone, checked the screen. "My phone has been blowing up for hours. I've been ignoring it, but reality is going to come crashing back and eventually. I have to deal with the Tokyo disaster. I have board meetings, damage control, a company to save. He looked back at her, his throat tight. But right now, in this moment, I have until dawn. Can that be enough? It has to be. She pulled his face down to hers, kissing him with a desperation that matched his own. So let's not waste it. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were both afraid the other might shatter. Stella's apartment was small enough that her bed was just a mattress on the floor with fairy lights strung overhead. And as Dominic laid her down on the soft blankets, he thought he'd never seen anything more beautiful than this woman looking up at him with trust and desire, and something that might have been love already blooming in her eyes. "You're sure?" he whispered, even though they both already said yes a dozen times. "I'm sure." She pulled him down to her, her hands mapping the planes of his chest as he unbuttoned his shirt with trembling fingers. "I'm terrified and sure and completely overwhelmed, but yes, I want this. I want you." He kissed her like she was precious, like she was the most valuable thing he'd ever held. And when they finally came together, when he was inside her and she was wrapped around him, and they were moving together in the oldest rhythm known to humanity, Dominic felt something fundamental shift in his universe. This wasn't just sex. This was connection, recognition. Two lonely people finding each other in the darkness, and deciding that whatever time they had was worth the inevitable pain of goodbye. Stella cried out his name as she came, her nails digging into his shoulders, and he followed her over the edge, burying his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of her, memorizing this moment because he knew that nothing would ever be the same after tonight. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her small bed, the fairy lights casting soft shadows across their skin. Stella's head was on his chest, her hand over his heart, and he stroked her hair with gentle, repetitive motions that seemed to soothe them both. "Tell me something true," she murmured, her voice sleep-soft. "Like what?" "Something you've never told anyone else." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his hand stilling in her hair. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I think I've been lonely my entire life. Even when I had everything, money, success, people around me constantly, I felt alone, like I was performing a role, and everyone else was on the script except me." Stella pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "You're not alone right now." "I know. That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because now I know what not being alone feels like. And when I lose it, when I lose you, the loneliness is going to be so much worse." She lifted her head, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him. Her hair was a wild mess, her lips still swollen from his kisses, her eyes soft and sad and beautiful. "What if you don't lose me?" "Stella." "No, listen. I know this is crazy. I know we just met, and you have your life, and I have mine, and all the logical reasons this can't work. But Dominic, I felt something the moment you walked into my cafe. Something I've never felt before. And I don't want to let that go just because it's complicated." Hope and fear warred in his chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying fight for this. Fight for us." Her voice was fierce now, determined. "You're a billionaire CEO who's made the impossible happen 100 times. Surely you can figure out how to date someone who lives in the same city as you. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's probably going to be really hard. But hard doesn't mean impossible." She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Unless you don't want to. Unless this really is just one night for you. In which case, I need you to tell me now so I can start building my walls back up before you completely demolish them." Dominic stared at her, this brave, beautiful woman who was offering him something he'd never thought he could have, a real connection, a real relationship, a real chance at happiness that wasn't tied to his net worth or his achievements. It was terrifying. It was also the easiest decision he'd ever made. "I want to fight for this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to fight for you. I just don't know how. Then we'll figure out together." She kissed him softly, sweetly. "But right now we still have—" She glanced at the clock on her phone. "For more hours until dawn. So can we just exist in this bubble a little longer? Can we pretend that tomorrow doesn't exist and we have all the time in the world?" "Yeah. He pulled her back down against him, holding her close. Yeah, we can do that. They talked through the night, their voices soft in the darkness. She told him about her childhood as a daughter of demanding Chinese immigrant parents who wanted her to be a doctor, about the pressure and expectations that had nearly killed her, about the relief and guilt of choosing a different path. He told her about his father's death, about finding him in the garage, about the way grief and rage and determination had twisted together into an engine that had driven him for 20 years, never letting him rest, never letting him be satisfied. They talk about books they loved, movies they watched 100 times, embarrassing childhood stories, dreams they'd given up on, hopes they were afraid to voice. They learned each other with words the way they'd learned each other with touch, mapping the interior landscapes that made them who they were. And when the first gray light of dawn began to filter through Stella's window, they both fell silent, watching it creep across the floor with a sense of impending doom. "It's morning," Stella whispered. "I know. You have to go back to your life now. I know. Dominic." Her voice cracked, and when he looked down, tears were streaming down her face. "I don't want you to go. I don't want to go either." He was crying too, he realized. When had that started? "God, Stella, I don't want to leave you." "Then don't. Stay. Quit your job. Move into my tiny apartment. Become a barista. We'll make it work." She was half joking, but there was a desperate edge to her voice that told him part of her meant it. And the truly insane thing was that part of him wanted to say yes. Wanted to walk away from everything he'd built, burn it all down, and start over with her in this small apartment above an airport cafe. But he couldn't. He had responsibilities, obligations, thousands of people who depended on him. He'd built an empire, and you couldn't just abandon an empire because you fell in love with a woman in one night. Fell in love. The thought stopped him cold. Was that what this was? Love? After one night, after a handful of hours. Could you really love someone? Looking at Stella's tear-stained face, feeling the ache in his chest that got worse with every second that brought him closer to leaving, Dominic realized the answer was yes. Yes, you could. "I have to go," he forced himself to say. "I have to go deal with the disaster I left behind. But Stella, I swear to you, this isn't over. Give me time to fix things, to stabilize my company, to figure out how to make this work. Can you do that? Can you wait for me? How long? I don't know. A week? 2 weeks? However long it takes to sort out the Tokyo mess and restructure my schedule, so I can actually have a life outside of work. And then what? You'll come back here? We'll date long distance? You'll fly in on weekends, and I'll be your airport girlfriend, always waiting for you to have time for me?" She pulled away from him, sitting up, wrapping her arms around herself. "That's not a relationship, Dominic. That's a fantasy. So what do you want me to do?" Frustration leaked into his voice. "Walk away from everything I've built? Abandon my company, my responsibilities? No. I want you to figure out what actually matters to you. Because if it's the company, if it's the money and the success and the empire, then go. Go now and let's end this clean before we hurt each other more than we already have. That's not fair. None of this is fair." She was crying harder now, her voice rising. "It's not fair that I met you. It's not fair that I fell for you. It's not fair that you made me believe in something real. And now you're leaving, and I don't know if you're ever coming back." "I will come back," he insisted, reaching for her. "Stella, I promise." "Don't make promises you can't keep." She stood up, wrapping the blanket around herself like armor. "You don't know what's going to happen when you walk out that door. You don't know if you'll still feel this way when you're back in your world, surrounded by all the things that were important to you before tonight. I'm just a barista in an airport cafe. What happens when you remember that? You're not just anything." He stood too, pulling on his clothes with jerky, frustrated movements. "You're the most real person I've met in my entire life. You're the first person who's made me want to be someone other than who I've been. How can you not see that?" "I see it. I just don't know if I believe it will last." The words hit him like a physical blow. "You don't trust me. I don't trust this. Us. Whatever this is. Because it's too much too fast, and those things never last. They burn bright, and then they burn out, and I can't." Her voice broke completely. I can't survive being burned, Dominic. I'm barely holding it together as it is. He wanted to argue, wanted to insist that they were different, that what they'd found was worth fighting for. But looking at her standing there, wrapped in a blanket, tears streaming down her face, walls going back up with every second that passed, he realized she was terrified. And so was he. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "Tell me what you need, and I'll do it." Stella was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was small and broken. "I need you to decide what you want your life to be. Not what you think you should want, not what makes sense, not what's best for your company. What you actually want. And then, when you know the answer to that, come find me. Or don't. But don't leave me hanging in limbo, waiting for phone calls that might not come, planning my life around someone who might not choose me. I'm choosing you right now." "No, you're not. You're choosing to go back to your life and try to squeeze me into it somewhere. That's not the same thing." She was right. God! She was right, and it killed him. His phone buzzed on the floor where he dropped it last night, the sound jarring in the tense silence. He glanced at it. 15 missed calls, 43 texts, all marked urgent. "You should get that," Stella said flatly. "Your real life is calling." "Stella, go, Dominic. Please. Just go before I completely fall apart." Every instinct screamed at him to stay, to fight, to make her understand that this was real, that he meant every word. But looking at her face, closed off, protected, already grieving, he realized that staying would only make it worse. So he did the hardest thing he'd ever done. He left. The walk back through the terminal felt like walking through water. Everything was muted, distant, unreal. People rushed past him to catch flights, clutching coffee and trailing luggage, and Dominic moved through them like a ghost. His phone rang again. "Michael." He answered. "Sir, thank God. Where have you been? The board has been trying to reach you all night. The Tokyo investors are livid. But I think we might be able to salvage something if we can get you on a video call in the next hour." "Schedule it." His voice sounded foreign to his own ears. Flat. Dead. "I'll be home in 40 minutes. "Are you okay, sir? You sound." "Just schedule the call, Michael." He hung up. By the time he reached his car, Michael had brought it from the private terminal. Of course. Ever efficient. Dominic had donned his armor again. CEO face. Business mode. The man who cried in Stella's arms might as well have been a different person. Except he wasn't. That person was still in there, screaming to turn around, to go back, to choose a woman over the empire. But he didn't turn around. He got in the car and drove back to Manhattan, back to his penthouse, back to his life. And with every mile that passed, he felt the distance between him and Stella growing, felt the fragile thing they'd built starting to crack under the weight of reality. By the time he walked into his apartment, all glass and steel and expensive emptiness, he'd made a decision. He would fix the Tokyo disaster. He would stabilize his company. He would get his life under control. And then he would go back for her. He had to, because the alternative, a life without Stella Chun in it, was no longer a life he wanted to live. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since Dominic had walked out of Stella's apartment. And in that time, he'd accomplished the impossible. He'd salvaged a Tokyo deal through a series of video conferences that had required him to stay awake for 48 hours straight, charm investors who had every right to hate him, and personally guarantee certain contract terms that made his board nervous but closed the deal. He'd restructured his entire company's leadership, delegating responsibilities he'd been clutching to his chest for years, creating systems that would allow him to step back without everything collapsing. He'd instituted new policies about work-life balance, much to his employees' shock and delight. Mandatory vacation days. No emails after 7 p.m. unless it was an actual emergency. Flexible scheduling for parents. He'd done everything he'd promised himself he would do. He'd fixed his company, stabilized his empire, and created space in his life for something other than work. And in those 3 weeks, he'd been more miserable than he'd ever been in his entire life. He thought about Stella constantly. Every cup of coffee tasted wrong. Every morning felt empty. He'd lie awake in his king-size bed in his penthouse apartment and remember the way she felt in his arms on her mattress on the floor, and the expensive sheets and the city view and the luxury meant nothing. He tried calling her. She didn't answer. He tried texting her. She responded with one word. Working. He tried sending flowers. They came back with a note. Returned to sender. She was shutting him out, and he didn't blame her. He'd left. He'd walked away when she needed him to stay, and now she was protecting herself the only way she knew how. But he wasn't giving up. On the 22nd day after he left her apartment, Dominic walked into his board meeting with a proposal that made every single person in the room go pale. You want to do what? Harrison Chun, his CFO, no relation to Stella, though Dominic had checked, stared at him like he'd suggested setting the building on fire. I want to step down as CEO. The room erupted in chaos. Voices overlapped, some angry, some panicked, all disbelieving. Dominic, you can't be serious. This company is you. Without you, the stock will tank. This is insane. Enough. His voice cut through the noise like a blade, and the room fell silent. I'm not abandoning the company. I'm restructuring my role. I'll remain as chairman of the board. I'll still be involved in major decisions and long-term strategy. But the day-to-day operations will be handed over to Sarah Mitchell. Sarah, his COO and the most competent person he'd ever worked with, looked shocked, but also was that excitement in her eyes? Sarah has been running things from behind the scenes for years, Dominic continued. She knows this company better than anyone except me. And honestly, she's probably better suited for the role than I am. She actually likes the operational details that I've always found tedious. But why? Marcus Young, his friend and head of investor relations, asked the question everyone was thinking. Why now? What's changed? Dominic took a breath, looked around the table at the men and women he'd worked with for years, who'd helped him build this empire, who deserved the truth. I met someone, he said simply. I met someone who made me remember that there's more to life than quarterly reports and profit margins. Someone who made me want to be a person again, not just a function. And I'm not willing to lose her, because I couldn't figure out how to balance ambition with happiness. The silence that followed was profound. Then Sarah spoke, her voice soft but clear. It's about damn time. Everyone turned to stare at her. What? She shrugged, unapologetic. We've all been watching him slowly kill himself with work for years. If it took falling in love for him to remember he's human, then good. I'm happy for him. And yes, I'll take the CEO position. I've been ready for years. One by one, around the table, he saw understanding dawn on faces. Even the ones who've been most resistant softened slightly. There will be conditions, Harrison said finally. Transition period. Performance benchmarks for Sarah. Communication protocols. We can't just flip a switch. Agreed. I'm not walking away tomorrow. But I need you all to understand that this is happening. The only question is whether we do it in an organized, strategic way, or whether I burn out completely and leave you all scrambling. He met each person's eyes in turn. I've given you everything for 12 years. I'm asking for the chance to have something for myself. Can you give me that? The vote was unanimous. 24 days after he'd left Stella's apartment, Dominic stood outside Iris's brew with his heart hammering against his ribs. It was evening, 6:47 p.m. according to his watch, and through the cafe's windows he could see her. She was behind the counter, making coffee for a customer, her movements as graceful and practiced as he remembered. She looked tired. The shadows under her eyes were darker than they'd been 3 weeks ago, but she was still beautiful. Still her, and seeing her made everything else fade to insignificance. He pushed through the door. The bell chimed, and Stella looked up. Their eyes met across the small space, and the world stopped. He watched her face cycle through emotions, surprise, hope, pain, anger, longing, all in the space of heartbeat. She looked like she might cry, or yell at him, or possibly throw a coffee cup at his head. Can I have a minute? He asked quietly, aware of the customers still waiting for their drink, aware of the 3 other people scattered at tables throughout the cafe. Stella's jaw tightened. She finished making the customer's latte with mechanical precision, handed it over with a forced smile, and then turned to the cafe at large. Everyone out, she said, her voice strained. We're closing early. Sorry. There were protests. But something in her expression must have communicated the seriousness of the situation, because within 2 minutes, the cafe had emptied. She locked the door behind the last customer and flipped the sign to closed. Then she turned to face him, arms crossed over her chest, walls firmly in place. You have 1 minute, she said. Talk. 1 minute. After 3 weeks of silence. He had 60 seconds to say everything he needed to say. I quit, he blurted out. Her eyebrows shot up. What? I quit. Well, I stepped down as CEO. I'm still involved with the company, but I'm not running it anymore. Someone else is. Someone who's better at it than me, honestly, and who actually wants a job. Stella stared at him. You quit your job? Yes. Your billion-dollar company. Yes. Because you were right. He took a step toward her, and she didn't move away, which he took as a good sign. You asked me what I wanted my life to be, and I couldn't answer you. So I spent the last 3 weeks figuring it out. And the answer is I want a life where I can breathe, where I can sleep without my phone next to my pillow, where I can meet someone amazing and not have to choose between them and my work. Dominic, I'm not done. Another step closer. I want a life where I know my employees' names and their kids' names and their dreams that have nothing to do with their jobs. I want to play piano again. I want to read books that aren't about business strategy. I want to spend Sunday mornings in bed with someone I love instead of in my office reviewing contracts. Tears were sliding down Stella's cheeks now, but she still hadn't moved, hadn't reached for him. I want all of those things, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. But mostly, Stella, I want you. I want to drink your incredible coffee every morning. I want to hear stories about your weird customers. I want to help you clean up at night and learn the difference between Arabica and Robusta beans, and be on your wall of photos as someone who mattered. You already matter, she whispered. Then let me matter more. Let me be someone who chooses you, not just with words, but with actions. He closed the final distance between them, standing close enough to touch, but not touching yet, giving her the choice. I spent 3 weeks getting my life under control, so I could offer you something real. Not stolen hours between business trips, not phone calls and video chats and constant rescheduling. Real time, real presence, real commitment. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm moving to New York permanently. I'm buying an apartment. Nothing as ridiculous as my penthouse. Something actually livable. I'm setting up my new office here. And I'm asking, no, I'm begging, for a chance to prove that what we had wasn't just one night. That it was the start of something that could last. Stella was openly crying now, her whole body shaking. You can't just reorganize your entire life for someone you barely know. I know you. He reached up, wiping her tears with gentle thumbs. I know you better after one night than I've known anyone in my entire life. And yes, there's still a lot to learn. I don't know your middle name or your favorite movie or whether you prefer cats or dogs. But I know what matters. I know you're kind and brave and ridiculously perceptive. I know you make me want to be better. I know that every day I spent without you has felt wrong. Dominic, I love you. The words tumbled out, urgent and true. I know it's too soon and too fast and probably too intense, but I love you, Stella Chun. I fell in love with you the moment you grabbed my hand and pulled me away from my breakdown, and I've been in love with you every second since. So please give me a chance. Let me prove this is real. Stella stared at him, her eyes swimming with tears, her lips trembling. For one horrible moment, he thought she was going to say no. Then she launched herself at him, her arms wrapped around his neck, her legs around his waist, and she was kissing him with a desperation that matched his own, tasting like salt and coffee and coming home. I love you too, she gasped between kisses. I've been so miserable. I tried to protect myself, tried to convince myself it was just one night, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about you. Couldn't stop hoping you'd come back. Couldn't stop loving you even though I was terrified. I'm here, he murmured against her lips, her cheek, her hair, kissing every inch of her face he could reach. I'm here and I'm not leaving. Never again. I promise. Don't make promises. This one I can keep. He set her down gently, only to cup her face in both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Stella, I restructured my entire life so I could be with you. I delegated. I reorganized. I hired people. I changed everything. The only thing I wouldn't change, was how I feel about you. You really stepped down as CEO. I really did. Sarah Mitchell is running the company now. She's brilliant. Possibly more brilliant than me, and she doesn't have a pathological need to control every detail. The company will be fine. Better than fine, probably. Stella laughed through her tears. You're insane. Probably. But I'd rather be insane and happy than successful and miserable. He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in. I missed you so much. Every single day. Every single hour. I missed you too. I kept making extra coffee every morning before I remembered you weren't coming in. I kept looking at the door, hoping. She trailed off, her voice breaking again. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I made you wait. I needed to make sure I could actually offer you something real. That I wasn't just running on emotion and crisis. I needed to prove to myself that I could change my life, not just say I would. And did you? Prove it. I think so. I haven't checked my work email in 4 days. That's a record for me. She pulled back slightly, her eyes widening. For days? Dominic Ashford hasn't checked his work email in 4 days. I've been busy buying an apartment and planning a grand gesture and being absolutely terrified that I'd show up here and you'd tell me to go to hell. I thought about it, she admitted. When I saw you standing there, my first instinct was to throw you out. You hurt me when you left. I know. I'm sorry. But then you said you quit your job and you love me, and honestly, my brain kind of short-circuited. She cupped his face, her thumb stroking his cheekbones. This is really happening? You're really here. I'm really here. And if you'll let me, I'd like to stay. Not just tonight, not just this week. I want to build a life here. With you. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. What if we crash and burn? What if this doesn't work? What if... Then we crash and burn together. He kissed her softly, slowly, pouring everything he felt into it. But I don't think we will. I think we're going to fight and make up and learn each other's weird habits and drive each other crazy sometimes. I think it's going to be messy and complicated and absolutely nothing like what I planned for my life. And I think it's going to be perfect. Stella searched his face, and he could see her making a decision. Saw the moment she chose to trust this. To trust him. To take the terrifying leap into the unknown. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's try. Let's be insane together. Relief flooded through him so intensely, it was almost painful. He kissed her again, deeper this time. His hand sliding into her hair, holding her close like he could keep her safe from every doubt and fear through sheer force of will. I have something for you, he murmured against her lips. If it's jewelry, I swear to God. It's not jewelry. He pulled back, reaching into his jacket pocket. Well, not the expensive kind anyway. He held out a small photograph, a Polaroid, slightly worn around the edges. Stella took it, her brow furrowing in confusion. Then her eyes widened as she realized what it was. It was a picture of them. Dominic hadn't even noticed when it was taken, but it must have been that first night, while they were cleaning the cafe together. He was wiping down a table, and she was laughing at something he'd said, and they were looking at each other with expressions that were so openly affectionate it made his chest ache to see it. How did you? The security camera, he explained. I may have pulled some strings with airport management to get access to the footage. Had this frame printed. I wanted... He paused, suddenly feeling vulnerable. I wanted to be on your wall, with everyone else who mattered. Even if you'd told me to leave tonight, I was going to ask you to put this up, so I'd be there. So I'd matter, even if we didn't work out. Stella's face crumpled, and she clutched the photo to her chest. You absolute idiot. You gorgeous, romantic, perfect idiot. Is that a yes? It's a yes to everything. Yes, you can be on my wall. Yes, you can stay. Yes, I'll give us a real chance. She grabbed his shirt, pulling him close. Yes to all of it. They stood there in the closed cafe, holding each other as the evening light faded outside, and the airport continued its endless cycle of arrivals and departures around them. For the first time in 3 weeks, Dominic felt like he could breathe. So what now? Stella asked eventually, her voice muffled against his chest. Now I help you finish closing up. Then I take you to dinner. Not anywhere fancy, somewhere with good food and bad lighting where we can just talk. Then, if you want, I'd like to see your apartment again. Spend the night. Wake up with you tomorrow. And after tomorrow? After tomorrow, I start my new life. The one where I'm not just a CEO, or a billionaire, or a brand. The one where I'm Dominic, your boyfriend, who helps you make coffee and clean tables, and is completely, utterly ordinary except for the fact that he's desperately in love with you. Stella smiled, and it was a sunrise smile he'd fallen for. Bright and warm and full of promise. Boyfriend, huh? That's very presumptuous of you. Would you prefer a different title? No. She stretched up on her toes to kiss him. Boyfriend is perfect. Everything is perfect. You're perfect. I'm really not. You're perfect for me. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Come on, let's finish closing up. You're on table duty. I'll handle the espresso machine. Yes, ma'am. They worked together in comfortable silence, falling into an easy rhythm like they'd been doing this for years instead of having one night together 3 weeks ago. And as Dominic wiped down tables in an airport cafe, his expensive suit traded for rolled-up shirt sleeves, his billion-dollar empire running without him, he felt something he'd been chasing his entire life finally settle into place. He felt happy, not the temporary high of closing a deal or the satisfaction of beating a competitor. Real happiness, the kind that came from choosing the right thing over the easy thing, from building a life instead of just a career, from loving someone and being loved in return. Hey, Dominic? Stella called from behind the counter. Yeah. Thank you for coming back. He looked at her, this woman who'd saved him without even trying, who'd shown him what mattered, who'd been brave enough to love him even when it was terrifying, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. Thank you for letting me, he said softly. She smiled, and in that smile, he saw their future. Messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. Exactly as it should be. The new location of Iris's Brew was everything the airport cafe had been and more. Warm, welcoming, with that same hand-painted sign and mismatched furniture, but bigger, better. In a neighborhood in Queens that was slowly gentrifying, bringing in young professionals and artists who appreciated good coffee and genuine atmosphere. Dominic had offered to buy her a space in Manhattan, somewhere high-end and prestigious. Stella had laughed and told him if he tried to turn her aunt's cafe into some bougie coffee shop for hedge fund managers, she'd break up with him on the spot. So they found this instead, a corner storefront with big windows and exposed brick, close enough to the subway that her regulars from the airport could still visit, far enough from Manhattan that the rent was reasonable. They'd kept the wall of photographs. It had taken a full day to carefully transport all of them, to arrange them in their new home with the same care Iris had used originally. And right in the center, in a place of honor, was the Polaroid of Dominic and Stella from that first night. Dominic looked at it now as he waited for the espresso to brew. He'd learned to make coffee. Not as well as Stella. He'd never be as good as Stella, but competently enough that he could handle the morning rush while she handled the baking in the back. This was his life now. 3 mornings a week, he worked the cafe counter. 2 days a week, he went into the office for board meetings and strategic planning sessions. The weekends were theirs, sleeping late, exploring the city, visiting Stella's aunt in Florida, playing piano in their apartment. They'd moved in together after 6 months, into a place that was bigger than her studio but smaller than his penthouse, with room for both of them to breathe. He was happy, genuinely, consistently happy in a way he'd never imagined possible. The door chimed, and he looked up to see a young woman in a business suit rushing in, her phone pressed to her ear, stress radiating from her in waves. I know, I'm sorry, she was saying into the phone. The meeting ran late, and then there was traffic, and I know, I'll be there as soon as I can. I just need coffee, or I'm going to collapse. She hung up and approached the counter, and Dominic saw the exact moment she recognized him. Her eyes widened, her mouth falling open slightly. You're Dominic Ashford. Guilty. He smiled, used to this now. The recognition happened less frequently than it used to. He'd stepped back from public life, done fewer interviews, let Sarah be the face of the company. But occasionally, someone still knew. What can I get you? What are you doing here? Are you buying this place? Is this some kind of investment opportunity? Nope. I work here. Well, part-time. My girlfriend owns a cafe. The woman looked utterly baffled. But you're Dominic Ashford. You don't work in cafes. I do now. And you look like you're having a really rough day. So can I recommend the house special? It's called Iris's Revival, and it's specifically designed for people who feel like the universe is targeting them. A laugh escaped her, surprise and genuine. That's exactly how I feel. Then that's what you need. He started making the drink, and as the espresso machine hissed and gurgled, he asked, "What happened?" "If you want to talk about it." "No pressure." She hesitated. Then the words came spilling out. "I missed my flight. I was supposed to be in Chicago 2 hours ago for the biggest presentation of my career, and I missed my flight because of a stupid accident on the highway, and now my boss is furious, and I'm probably gonna get fired, and everything is falling apart." Dominic felt a smile tug at his lips. "You know, I missed a flight once. It was the best thing that ever happened to me." "How is missing a flight the best thing that ever happens to someone?" "Because it forced me to stop, to breathe, to remember that I was a person, not just a job title." He finished the latte, creating the simple heart design in the foam that Stella had taught him. Sometimes the universe isn't targeting you. Sometimes it's saving you from something that you're too stubborn to save yourself from. The woman took the cup, cradling it in both hands. That's a very zen way of looking at catastrophic professional failure. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience. The flight I missed cost me $17 million. Her eyes went wide again. What? Long story. But the point is, it felt like the end of the world at the time. Turned out to be the beginning of a much better one. He gestured around the cafe. This is what came from that misflight. My girlfriend, this cafe a life I actually want to live instead of one I'm just surviving. The woman took a sip of her coffee, and he saw some of the tension leave her shoulders. This is really good. I know. Stella, my girlfriend, she's a genius with coffee. As if summoned, Stella emerged from the back, flour dusting her apron, a tray of fresh croissants in her hands. She took one look at Dominic talking to the stressed businesswoman and smiled, understanding immediately. She'd seen him do this dozens of times now. Pay forward the kindness she'd shown him that night. Help strangers who were having their own worst days. "Morning rush crew incoming," Stella announced, nodding toward the window where a small crowd was forming outside, waiting for them to officially open. "I should go," the businesswoman said. "But thank you for the coffee and the perspective. Anytime. And hey," Dominic pulled out his phone. "What's your name?" Jessica Park." "Okay, Jessica, I'm gonna do something for you." "What's your boss's name?" "Mr. Harrison." "Why?" Dominic typed quickly on his phone, then hit send. "I just emailed him. Explained that you missed your flight due to circumstances beyond your control, and that any company that would fire someone over a single missed meeting due to traffic is being short-sighted and stupid. I may have also mentioned that if he does fire you, my company is always hiring talented people." Jessica stared at him. You can't just..." "I absolutely can. And I just did." He grinned. "You'll be fine, Jessica. I promise. Sometimes the universe isn't ending your story. It's just editing it." She left in a daze, still clutching her coffee, and Stella came up beside Dominic, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "You're such a softie," she murmured against his back. "I learned from the best." He turned in her arms, pulling her close. She missed a flight. How could I not help? How indeed? Stella stretched up to kiss him, brief and sweet. "I love you, you ridiculous man. I love you too. How's the bacon coming?" "Good. We're going to sell out of the chocolate croissants by noon, guaranteed. She paused, her expression turning slightly nervous. So, I have something to tell you. His heart skipped. Good something or bad something? Good. I think. I hope. She took a breath. I got a call this morning. A producer from the Food Network. They want to do a feature on the cafe. On us. The billionaire who quit to become a barista and the woman who taught him what matters. Stella, that's incredible. Is it? I mean, it's going to be so public. Everyone's going to know our story. Your old business associates, my parents who still barely speak to me, everyone. Are you okay with that? Dominic thought about it. A year ago, the idea of having his personal life dissected on television would have horrified him. But now, I'm proud of this, he said simply. I'm proud of you, of us, of what we built. If sharing our story helps even one person realize that there's more to life than work, then yeah, I'm absolutely okay with it. Stella's smile was radiant. You're sure? I'm sure. He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. I've never been more sure of anything. The door chimed again, the morning rush beginning in earnest, and they broke apart, moving to their respective stations with the practiced ease of people who'd found their rhythm. As Dominic called out orders and made coffee and chatted with customers, he caught sight of their reflection in the mirror behind the counter. Him in a simple t-shirt and jeans, Stella in her flour-dusted apron. Both of them smiling, both of them exactly where they were supposed to be. He'd missed a flight 1 year ago and lost $17 million. But he'd found something worth infinitely more, a life he actually wanted to live. And really, that was the best deal he'd ever made.